I needed to wait for several days before I made a posting about the tragic and untimely death of Malcolm Jamal Warner, who was very important to my peer group culturally for his contribution to what I would consider to be the greatest rehabilitation of the image of the Black family in the history of American arts and media. Playing the son on the show that really changed the way America was willing and able to see and celebrate Black people meant more than words can really capture. Malcolm Jamal Warner being Theo Huxtable made America look at a young Black man and feel no fear, feel no menace, but at the same time, not feel like he was a false representation or that his character was designed to bring forth their comfort. He was just being. You know, he was a young man growing up in a good, healthy nuclear family, and he was just being. So many of us aspired to have the life that he had and to be what he was. Like so many other Black kids at the time, I was living in a single parent household when the Cosby Show came out. I could relate to Theo Huxtable in that both of my parents were college educated, but my parents were not together. They were 800 some odd miles apart, and I was with my father and not with my mother. And visiting the Cosby Show every Thursday at 8 o'clock just made me feel good seeing that on screen, and I could not have enjoyed it more. And the brother did so much more with his career than just that, but that was the beginning of what was an impressive career. But I needed to hold on to my personal take on this thing because it could very well have generated a distraction from people just grieving the loss of a man that deserved to be honored and grieved. But my favorite thing about him, despite the art that he created and contributed to, was how he handled the situation when a dear friend of his fell on hard times in the court of public opinion and in the criminal courts and civil courts of this country. When everyone was down on Bill Cosby, as down as you can possibly get, setting aside whatever the reasons are or whatever you think might be or what I think may be. The truth is that the way that Malcolm Jamal Warner handled that situation was as noble gets. Bill Cosby was a friend to him. He felt that friendship, and the benefit of that friendship changed his life. It was not for him to join the chorus of people who were lining up to denounce and discredit and disparage him. It wasn't for him to do that. However he may have felt privately, he did not join the mob in condemning Bill Cosby and rushing to judgment on Bill Cosby or anything else like so many others found their way to do. I think it's noteworthy that broadly, the people who worked on the Cosby Show did not join that chorus, but I single him out in particular because as a Black man, the pressure to do so was probably greater than most of us would care to imagine. But he didn't do that. However you feel about his response, which was to point out that there are other men of great note and power and influence in the entertainment industry who've been accused of other heinous acts and crimes against women or whatever. You may have found that to be distasteful, but Malcolm didn't give a shit, and neither do I. Because the reality of the situation is that when someone is your friend and you are really down with that person, you do not join the mob to condemn that person. If you have something to say to them in the way of objecting to whatever it is that they've done, Because y'all are friends, you can tell them that eye to eye. It does not mean that you stop loving or caring for that person. If you are my dear friend, and I have a few, not many, but I have a few in this world, and they were accused of doing what he had done, I would not walk away from them. Okay? I would express my thoughts to them privately. Publicly, I would continue to acknowledge that they are my friend. And if that were to cost me something, that whoever is trying to take from me, fuck them, and whatever mob they're riding with, I don't care about that. Because when you are friends with someone, you don't just stick by them when the whole world is lining up to lick their balls, okay, or want something from them. You ride with them when it's hard, when nobody else is there, and you show up at their time of need to express that you still see value in them. You still see the good in them. Acknowledge what they did for you in your life. And acknowledge the fact that if you did this wrong thing, yes, you have to pay your penalty. You did wrong, you have to pay the price for it, like anybody else. But after that price has been paid or those issues have been resolved, y'all are still intact. That matters. It matters to everyone, but especially to Black men, because we so often find ourselves on the wrong side of accusations that gain momentum very quickly, and judgment is rushed to with great urgency and eager energy that doesn't seem to follow everyone else who gets themselves into a jam. And I do say gets themselves into a jam because the fact of the matter that Bill Cosby himself acknowledged that he liked to use quaaludes as a part of his dating ritual or whatever you may want to call it. That's a dangerous activity. He got into trouble over that. And he has dealt with that legally. We have courts in this country, and they don't work that well all the time, but it is what we have. It's what we have, okay? So for all of those who wanted to have a full-on Bill Cosby burning at the stake to air out whatever their grievances are, whether it was envious competitors in the entertainment world. Comics are notoriously competitive with one another and hostile towards those who they feel have succeeded wildly despite having pedestrian talent, which, if you listen closely, is the beef that a lot of other comedians had with Bill Cosby. They just didn't think it was that funny and didn't think he deserved to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars for the comedy that he was doing. And they're entitled to that opinion. But in the end, comedy is pretty simple. If people buy what you're selling, you win. End of story. And Bill Cosby won. And Malcolm Jamal Warner, among many others, was a beneficiary of that. And the first thing I thought about when he died, the second thing I thought about after he died, other than this is sad, this is a terrible loss, was really respecting where he came out when this thing happened. I respected that. And more of us should be that way. More of us should stand with our friends in times of trouble. It does not mean supporting what they did if they did it. It does not mean making public excuses for anything that they did do. But it does mean that holding them to account does not mean joining a goddamn high-tech lynching. That's what it means. Okay, and Black folks should be especially tuned in to the reality of how quickly a modified story or outright fabrication can spread on one of ours and wind up with catastrophic results. We should know that and never, ever, ever forget it. However we feel about someone, we should never forget that. And Malcolm Jamal Warner never forgot that. And God bless the brother. He will be sorely missed. But now that enough time has passed, let's embrace that part of his legacy as well. A legacy of manhood, of brotherhood, of friendship, being able to work with people, even when he found that he disagreed with them and they weren't that same kind of guy, as I understand was his issue with Eddie Griffin. And they wound up being cool with it after the fact, but they had a tough time working together, but they worked together successfully. That is an example that we all would be well advised to follow. That's for the record on Freestyle Politics. Peace.